very much for the introduction. I'm Judith Davy, not Judy, and I'm be looking at the situation of older people and the implications of population aging on just about everything for a good 20 years now. And I'm delighted to have found Living Streets because this topic is one of my favorites. Isn't that a good logo? I found it in a British regular, it's called the Centre for Better Aging. Now, why is this important? You've already heard about the amount of walking that people may or may not do, but one point is that older people are especially vulnerable as road users. They're overrepresented among road deaths for pedestrians, and they're overrepresented in injuries to older pedestrians. And also, it's interesting that walking accounts for a higher proportion of trips for the 65 plus age group than for the total population. Now, that, of course, as we have heard, depends on how you define trips. But those are the figures I've got. But one important thing is that I think road casualty figures don't include trips and falls on footpaths, which is what very often happens to older people, including myself, where footpaths are not graded well, are not smooth, difficult to negotiate because of other things and people on the footpath. So that's the background of why I think it's important. Older people are especially vulnerable as road users in general. Right, next. And I was very interested to hear the comment earlier about equity. I think there is a social justice aspect to this. And there's a quote I found: making walking easier is an equal opportunities issue. As long as walking is disproportionately carried out by people on lower incomes, women, children, and older people, it will be seen as a lower status mode of transport. And I think that's well worth thinking about. I remember seeing a letter to a business newspaper saying that the CEO of somewhere was seen waiting for a bus on Queen Street as if he was just come out of an opium den or something. It's definitely a question of status, and walking doesn't have as high a status as going around in a car. So that's the second point I wanted to make. Next, what is the problem? And these comments and these slides came out of a study called Improving the Safety of Older Pedestrians, which was done a while ago in 2007 through the New Zealand Institute for Research on Aging, which unfortunately has now been disestablished by the university. And we used funding from the John Bailey Road Safety Research Fund, which I think was quite an interesting contribution. So what is the problem? Well, as you all well know, pedestrian infrastructure. In many suburban areas, there are no footpaths, or they serve only one side of the road. And this is a picture taken in Waikanae. Going down the main road in Waikanae, you have a lovely footpath on one side. Suddenly it stops and carries on the other side. It means you have to cross the main road to carry on walking. So the suburban areas and the surfaces, as I said before, are not ideal for walking. Uneven paving stones, covered with leaves, which make them very slippery. The gradient and the design of curbs and the cut downs are all ways of providing problems for walkers, particularly older walkers. Okay, next. In the central city, the footpaths are often obstructed. These are what people call sandwich boards. They're not what I think of, sandwich boards, but they are a nuisance. Sandwich boards, shop goods, cafe furniture on the footpath, not to mention the inconsiderate other users. And I've mentioned their skateboard, cyclists and scooters. When we did this research, scooters weren't as evident as they are now. And of course, parked cars, which is something which Living Streets has made quite a noise about. So footpaths are often obstructed, and that makes it much harder for walkers, especially those who visually or mobility impaired. So that's another problem. Next. This driveways and building entrances which cross footpaths. I live on the terrace, and between where I live on the terrace, going down to Woodward Street to walk into town, there are 14 exits from car parks and parking areas coming out across the footpath, and very often not giving way easily to pedestrians. There's a notice just outside the James Cook Hotel, which this shows, which says, watch out for cars. There's nothing inside which says, watch out for pedestrians. And I believe that pedestrians give way to cars on the roadway, so when vehicles cross footpaths, they should give way to walkers. And that is in fact the case. But I think that's another extra danger put in the way of pedestrians and, as I said before, particularly older pedestrians. But next, the big one, of course, is getting across the road. Often they're not sufficient safe crossing points, particularly on high volume roads. And even when there are crossing points, they're not always observed well by drivers. And a particular problem, which I'm sure you have got to before me, is the time allowed at signal crossings to get across. When the green man appears, you set off and it's gone to red before you're even halfway across the road. And this is really too short for many people who have impediments of some kind. And for older people as well, it creates anxiety, in which case they might rush the rest of the road and risk falling or getting into trouble. So crossing the road. Now, there are ways of dealing with that. There was one very good example I found overseas, where people who had mobility problems could swipe a card at the traffic lights, which automatically gave them more time to cross. And seeing we're all walking, including myself, walking about with gold cards these days, it wouldn't be too difficult to swipe your card and get a little bit longer to get across the road. Another aspect of this is having an island in the middle of the road, which this shows this on, you probably recognize Oriental Bay in Wellington, where you can cross half and then walk a little way and cross the other half, only having to look in one direction for the traffic. There's also another innovation called pelican crossings, which I haven't time to go into here, which has a way of calculating the time which is needed to get across and will not allow the cars to start again until all the pedestrians have cleared the crossing. There are some of those in Lower Hutt, which other people may know more about. So crossing roads is a really big one. So next, given that I've only got a short time, I won't go into all those other details, but I'd love to talk to people about it. And although it's marvelous that we've managed to continue having this conference, we're not able to go out and chat to people during coffee breaks, but perhaps sometime we might manage that. So what I think is needed to help reduce the danger to older pedestrians and many other groups is awareness, consultation, and education. And we have heard quite a bit this morning about awareness, about people really understanding what the situation is with respect to pedestrians, that older people may have a reduction in physical abilities, vision, hearing, walking speed, and this affects their safety of pedestrians. And given that we have an aging population, we need to be aware, everybody needs to be more aware of these needs and of these dangers. And traffic planning and managing strategies need to bear this in mind, as I say. So it needs a two-way approach, and that's what I mean by consultation. Hearing, and We Living Streets is marvelous at trying to make people hear. Consultation between the users, between pedestrians and planners and traffic managers and so on, that's needed. And education, and this has been mentioned already, to planners and other people can improve pedestrian safety by consultation, and then ensuring that there is awareness of these special concerns, of these special groups. And so I'm talking particularly about older people, but I think much of what I'm saying applies to other groups in the population. So pedestrians have rights, and we should be pushing for them. Thanks.